The squeal of my cart's wheel was the only music left in our village. All the other sounds had died long ago. The laughter of children, the barking of dogs, the drunken songs spilling from the tavern. Now, there was only the squeal, the dry coughs from behind shuttered windows, and the wet, heavy thud as I heaved another body onto the planks. My master, old Gunther, used to say that death had a smell. He was wrong. It has 100 of them. The cloying rot of flesh, the sharp tang of vinegar we used to scrub our hands, the sickly sweet smoke of herbs burning on street corners in a futile attempt to ward off the pestilence. I was 17, and I knew these smells better than I knew the scent of fresh bread. My hands were calloused, not from a farmer's scythe, but from a gravedigger's spade. I buried neighbors, childhood friends, the old woman who used to sneak me apples. Gunther himself succumbed a week ago. I burned his body alone, as he had asked. Now I was the only body collector for 3 villages. But I endured. I had a reason. Her name was Lena, my sister, 8 years old. Her pale blonde hair was the only bright thing left in our gray, dying world. After the plague took mother and father, she became everything to me. I would lock her inside our little cottage when I went out for the day's harvest. I'd lie to her, telling her I was going to play with friends, not that I was dragging their bloated corpses to the pits. Every evening, I scrubbed my hands with lye and ice-cold water until they were raw, just to be able to hold her. I was terrified of carrying death home on my own skin. Everything changed the day he arrived. I saw him from a distance, a black silhouette against a blood-red sunset. The plague doctor. He did not ride a horse, but walked, his long staff tapping a steady, unnerving rhythm on the cobblestones. He wore a waxed leather cloak that reached his ankles, and that hideous mask, the one with a bird's beak and glassy, round eyes. They said the beak was filled with herbs to protect him from the miasma. To me, he looked less like a healer and more like a great carrion crow come to feast on our dead. He spoke to no one. He simply took up residence in the abandoned apothecary's home and began his rounds. He made no pretense of healing. He just walked from house to house. If he was met with silence, he would paint a red cross on the door and move on. If he heard a cough, he would let himself inside. No one knew what he did in there. Those he visited never spoke of it again. At night, I would be the one to collect their bodies. Sometimes I found them contorted in unnatural positions, their faces frozen in a silent scream no one had heard. I forbade Lena from even looking out the window, but fear was a sticky thing. It seeped through the cracks in the walls. And one night, I heard it, a small, dry cough from her room. My heart stopped for a beat, then hammered as if it meant to break through my ribs. I went to her. She was sitting up in bed, small and frightened. "Thomas, I'm so cold," she whispered. I touched her forehead. It was burning. All night I prayed to every god I knew and to a few I invented on the spot. But by morning her breathing had grown ragged and I found a small, hard lump under her arm. The plague was in my house. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the crow and the black cloak would soon be at my door. I grabbed the wood axe from the hearth, sat by the door, and waited. I would not give him Lena. He would not take her while I was still breathing. The silence in our cottage was heavier than any stone I'd ever lifted. It was a thick, suffocating blanket, punctuated only by Lena's shallow, rattling breaths. I sat by the door, the axe handle cold and slick in my sweaty palms, my knuckles white. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the shutters was the sound of his approach. I watched my sister. The fever painted her cheeks with a mockery of health, a rosy blush that I knew was the bloom of death. She whimpered in her sleep, her small hands clutching at the thin blanket as if trying to pull herself out of a nightmare. I was a fool to think I could protect her. I was a boy with an axe against a god named Pestilence. Then came the sound. Tap, a pause. Tap, the rhythmic strike of his staff on the cobblestones, slow and deliberate, a metronome counting down the final seconds of our lives. It grew louder, closer, until it stopped right outside our door. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could feel his presence through the thick oak, a cold spot in the warm, sick air of the room. A single, soft knock. "Go away," I screamed, my voice cracking like a boy's. "There's no one sick here. We are healthy. By God, leave us be." There was no answer, just the oppressive stillness. I imagined him standing there, his head tilted slightly, the glass eyes of his beaked mask staring at the wood, through the wood, right at me. He was playing a game. He knew I was lying. He could smell the sickness just as I could. He was waiting for the fear to break me. Then, a voice. So unlike what I had expected. It wasn't a croak or a whisper. It was calm, measured, and devoid of any emotion. It was like the voice of a scholar or a priest. "The sickness is a fire, son," the voice said, clear and steady. "You can shut the door, but the house will still burn. Open the door. Let me ease her passage. There is no cure, but there can be mercy." Mercy? The word was a venomous dart. What mercy had he shown the baker, whom I found with his eyes wide open in a silent scream? What mercy did he offer the blacksmith's wife, whose hands were clenched so tight her nails had drawn blood from her palms? "Demon, I'll send you back to hell," I yelled, pressing my back against the door as if my weight could keep him out. Again, silence. But this time, it was followed by a new sound, a soft scraping, the clink of metal on stone. He wasn't trying to break the door down. He was setting up something. I crawled to the window, my axe dragging behind me, and peered through a tiny crack in the shutter. The twilight was fading, casting long skeletal shadows. The doctor was kneeling on the ground. He had opened a dark leather bag and was laying out instruments on a cloth. They shone dully in the dying light. Thin knives, strange metal hooks, and a long, slender steel rod. Then he produced a small brazier, and with a flint and steel, he lit a small, hissing fire. He placed the tip of the steel rod into the flames. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a healer's kit. It was a torturer's. Lena cried out behind me, a sharp, pained gasp. "Thomas, it hurts! Make it stop, please!" Her pleas shattered what was left of my resolve. She was in agony. Keeping the doctor out meant watching her suffer until the plague choked the last breath from her. But letting him in, what fresh hell would he unleash upon her with that glowing rod? The doctor seemed to hear her cry. He stood up, the heated rod in his hand, its tip a malevolent orange eye in the gloom. "Her suffering has begun," his calm voice stated, not a question, but a fact. "It will only get worse. I offer a clean end, a quiet sleep. It is more than God offers these days." I looked from the glowing rod to my sister's trembling form. A clean end, a quiet sleep. He wasn't here to save her. He was here to kill her, and he called it mercy. The handle of the axe was a splintery foreign thing in my hand. It was a tool for chopping wood, not for fighting shadows. I looked at Lena, her body now racked with violent shivers, a low guttural moan escaping her lips with every pained breath. The bubo under her arm was now a dark, angry purple, swollen to the size of a hen's egg. She was no longer my sister. She was a vessel for an agony I couldn't comprehend. Her blue eyes, glazed with fever, found mine. They weren't pleading anymore. They were just empty. She was already gone. I was just guarding her shell. The doctor's voice came again, as patient as a river eroding stone. Every moment you wait is another lifetime of pain for her. There is no victory here, boy. Only a choice between two kinds of grief. Let her sleep. Let her sleep. The words echoed in the hollow space where my courage used to be. I was not protecting her from him. I was trapping her with her suffering. My fight was selfish. I was trying to keep her for myself, even if it meant her damnation. With a rattling sob that tore itself from my throat, I let the axe fall. It clattered on the stone floor, the sound of my surrender. My legs felt like lead as I stumbled to the door and lifted the heavy bar. The wood groaned in protest. I pulled the door open. He stood there, a towering black effigy against the last of the evening's light. Up close, he was even more terrifying. The glass eyes of his mask were blank, reflecting my own terrified face. A strange, cloying scent of camphor, cloves, and something else, something sterile and metallic, wafted from him. He paid me no mind, as if I were a piece of furniture. His gaze was fixed on the small bed in the corner. He stepped inside, his leather cloak rustling like dry leaves, and moved directly to lean aside. The glowing rod was still in his gloved hand. I wanted to scream, to rush him, to find the strength I'd just abandoned, but I was frozen, a spectator at my own private execution. The doctor placed his bag and the brazier on the floor. He laid Lena's arm gently across her chest, exposing the vile swelling. He did not speak to her, or to me. He worked with a detached, methodical grace. He took the heated rod, and with one swift, precise movement, lanced the bubo. There was a sickening hiss, a smell of burnt meat and corruption that filled the tiny room and choked me. Lena's body arched off the bed in a silent final spasm. Her eyes flew wide open, and then she was still. The shivering stopped. The moaning ceased. The terrible, rattling sound of her breath was replaced by a profound silence. He had kept his promise. It was a clean end, a quiet sleep. The doctor wiped the steel rod on a cloth, the metal now dark with scorched blood and pus. He moved without hurry, packing his strange instruments one by one back into his leather bag. He showed no emotion, no pity, no satisfaction. He was simply a craftsman finishing a job. When he was done, he stood, his faceless mask turning to me for the first and only time. I couldn't see his eyes, but I felt their weight. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Then he turned and walked out the door, leaving it open behind him. I heard him outside for a moment, the faint scratching of chalk on wood. He was painting his red cross. I stood there for an eternity, the foul air burning my lungs. Then I slowly walked to Lena's bed. I reached out a trembling hand and touched her cheek. It was still warm, but it was the warmth of a cooling ember, not a living fire. I was alone. I did not weep. The tears were frozen inside me. I was the village graveyard. I knew what had to be done. I went outside, into the cold night air, and took the handles of my cart. The wheel gave its familiar, soul-crushing squeal as I pushed it towards my own open door. I had a new harvest to collect, the last piece of my world, and I knew that for the rest of my days, every time I heard that sound, I would not be thinking of the dead I buried, but of the mercy that I had allowed.